How about now? Wait, that looked a bit too loud. You should be hearing this. Okay. Alright. So this is a bit of an experiment. Let me know what works best for you. If you'd like me to keep talking like this, or talk a bit louder, start whispering, or if there's anything in particular you'd like to hear, just let me know. How are you all doing today? Hang on. We probably don't need a fireplace and piano. Fire and rain would be a bit much. How's the let me know if the rain background is a bit too much also. Can't really hear? I have no idea what you're talking about, Theo. Oh, hey, welcome, Sulfuro. Welcome. Wait, let's get this close to the mic. There we go. Fire as well, but a little quieter. Okay. There we go. Just that tiny little bit in the background. Alright. How's that? Yeah, I suppose pouring a glass of wine would sound a lot like peeing. I was hoping the clink of the glass and the cork would make it, not sound like that. But yeah, I suppose that's maybe not something I want to make a habit of. All right, so there are a lot of different ways we can do this. I am just mainly wanting this to be kind of a chill hangout. An experiment. Let me know if you guys like this and if you would like more of it. If there's any kinds of sounds you in particular would like to hear, of course let me know. I've got some things that I thought of. I have no idea how well this will work, so give me your honest feedback. I don't know if that sounds nice at all, but I always like the sound of those. I hope Jacob memorized the lyrics to Baka Mitai just for this stream. Oh shit. Wait, oh damn. Let's see if I can do that one. Alright, let's see here. Baka mitai kodomo nano ne. Yume wo oute kizu tsuite. Uso ga heta na kusei ni waraenai. せた I love you もろくに言わない口下手でほんまに不器用なのにどうしてさよなら言えたのダメダメダメよダメなのよあんたが好きで好きすぎてどれだけ強いお酒でも歪まない思い出がバカみたいHow's that? Awesome, glad you liked it. Now, here's a question. Would you prefer if I talked in kind of a whisper like this? Do you like whisper more? Or just regular talking voice but soft? Because, by the way, I have not actually practiced this at all. I don't know what I sound like right now. So I'm going entirely off of your feedback. I didn't realize I'd do this either, but I got a hankering. I wanted to try it out. I've been really into just general atmospheric sounds recently. Rainy piano is an old favorite of mine, but yeah. And so I was like, hey, maybe we have some people in our audience that also enjoy this kind of stuff. And we do have very nice microphones because of, well, needing them for recording. Oh, that's been intentional, FN. Wait. Hang on a sec. There we go. That has been intentional, Evan. Let's resize this a little bit. I want to keep myself on my toes. Keep you all on your toes too. It's really easy to get in, with the streaming, to just end up doing a bunch of different games, but I want to think outside the box a bit more. Test myself, see how well I can entertain you guys without some other content. Ooh, bright in comparison to the rest of the screen. That's a good point. That's a good point. Well, let's experiment. Let's see if there's any way I can adjust that. Never tried to change something like that before. Let's see. Let's try some color correction. Yes, there are some pretty great polls going up right now, so should definitely get on those. Maybe about like that? How's that? Yeah, exactly, Cryogenics. This is a place that you can come to for a bit of peace and quiet away from all the madness of the polls. I do want to watch Summertime Render. I've heard very good things about it. So, tell me about your week, chat. How have you been? Also, let me know what you think about the brightness of chat right now, of the chat window. This seems about good, but, let me know. Looks perfect, wonderful. It's been chill, been studying for a new career profession for a while now. Oh. Wow. Way to go, Cryogenics. That's a big step. That's a big leap. How's that been going? And what career are you changing into? Yes, LPK, that is why we made the Cyberpunk Edgerunners poll a double slot. Because we very much want to watch it, but at the same time, it kind of dominate whatever poll it was in. Oh, if I need to be more intentional with my enunciation backseat, let me know. Is that a volume issue or my pronunciation? I can talk a bit louder if needed. Volume, okay. Can I hear from everyone else, chat? I don't want to change the volume entirely because of one person, but at the same time, I'm hearing it pretty well, but I have headphones. Okay. Well, I suppose I can talk a little bit louder. Try and make it easier for you. I think it's good. Okay. Your voice is kind of close to the same volume as the music you're playing at your current whisper level. I see. Good to know. I will turn the music down a little bit. Hey, Shunny boy. Welcome. Cozy vibes while I slog away at college work, doctor's orders. Well, gotta do what the doctor says. It was just a bit too below the piano volume for a minute, but now it's fine. Okay, perfect. Used to work in engineering, but COVID way back then kind of screwed over the industry for a bit and was a bit unstable. So I'm going into IT/computer networking, maybe even cybersecurity. I use cyberpunk relevance later in my life. Cool. I've always found cybersecurity fascinating. Not that I would ever have the patience for doing work with computers. Interesting story about that backseat reel. A friend of mine, who may or may not be in chat right now, is DMing a Cyberpunk Red game that I made a character for, who I quite enjoy. And I ended up getting the game, Cyberpunk 2077, just to use the character builder and get to know the world a bit more. I was prepared for it to be bad and incomplete, but I was not prepared enough. It was truly garbage and unplayable. Just the tutorial alone. What makes you think I played a male? No, I played the character that I'm playing in the cyberpunk world. Their name is Valeria Mendoza, but they're a boxer with the name of Carnage. The art that I found for them was a rather stylish fan art of Noi from Dorohedoro. This was after the patches. This was just recently, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'd heard about the patches, so I was like, hey, maybe it'll be playable now. No, not really. It's still quite bad. Yes, you can choose whatever genitalia you prefer. Yes. Oh, I can imagine, Mort. I can indeed imagine. Alright, so I want to keep this learning experience not just me talking all softly to you guys, so let me know what sounds good. Right. So there's that. Hopefully you were able to get a good sense of that. There's also and this is purely experimentation, so make sure to let me know what you like and what you don't. Glitched out like had a glitch, or glitched out like game crashed. Game crash, wow. And that's recently, damn. Coaster tapping is always popular? Okay, alright. I didn't get far into the game. I got past the intro. I did the Street Rat origin, which was thoroughly boring and unimaginative. You try to steal a car, great. I've heard the Corpo one is pretty good though. It goes through a dystopian, clock in, clock out kind of montage. I don't really mind spoilers. If anything, that would actually be helpful because it helps me understand the world better for the campaign I'm playing in. Why, thank you, James Nash. I am almost entirely new to ASMR. I watched a VTuber do an ASMR stream because I wanted to see what kind of streams they did. And I was surprised because I noticed that they enjoyed they had the same kind of taste in rainy piano as me. So I didn't even really either, I knew of it, but I never really saw the appeal until I found that life was just stressful, and having on one of those 8 or 10 hour rainy piano videos in the background it was nice. It was calming. And then I realized that was fairly adjacent to ASMR and kind of went from there. But I don't know much about it. I just sort of realized, hey, sounds can be nice. Is it okay if I spoil chat on Puss in Boots 2? I can't talk to my friends about it because they didn't watch it yet. Well, I'll let chat decide. Chat, have any of you not seen Puss in Boots 2 yet? Though I suppose even if they aren't in chat, there probably would be a fair amount of people that haven't seen it. If you haven't seen Puss in Boots 2, I highly recommend it. It is an absolutely beautiful, fantastic film that needs all the support it can get. You don't need to have seen the first one, and it is just I had a beautiful experience with it. It is easily in my top 3 favorite DreamWorks films of all time, and it might be my number 1. Not sure. A lot of Twitch ASMR is piano and rain in the background, whereas YouTube ASMR is more There's often more specific triggers and role plays, both super relaxing. Okay. I wonder if that's affected by the differences in music content ID between the two websites. Interesting backseat. I would definitely agree on the masterpiece material. Oh, that's okay. I was wondering what the 10% bit you didn't care for was. I thought the dog was fantastic. I know that that archetype of character is one that many people don't enjoy because it is often the Jar Jar situation. Exactly. Jar Jar is the negative example of it. But quite frankly, let's be real. I had a ton of fun with Jar Jar as a kid. Now, it can be jarring for the adults in the audience, absolutely. But I think if I were to say one of my absolute favorite examples of that type of character being used in a story to what I thought was great effect, I would probably say that one of, if not my favorites, is Olaf from Frozen. Not counting Frozen 2, just the first one. He definitely had a lot of the traits that one would assume for a character that is clearly to sell toys and to interest the kids. But he had a purpose in that movie. And he did have some moments that maybe were more targeted for adults and weren't necessarily just for the kids. And I believe that the dog in Puss in Boots 2 also handled that very well. He was annoying at the start, but that's part of the point. But for me, after, very, very quickly after, certainly once the three of them are all adventuring together, he didn't get on my nerves anymore. The dog was ignorant and fearless throughout the entire movie, and somehow he can lecture everyone else. Well, I believe the reason it's not, I don't think he actually ever lectured anyone is the thing. He is the example of, granted, he doesn't have to struggle with it, but if you saw him struggling with it, then would there be any point in telling Puss's story? Well, he definitely has it figured out. Not everyone can be as lucky as him, of course, and not have any conflict surrounding it, but he does have the right perspective. The way I see it, it's more just that it is very easy for him to have that perspective, and so I could see that being off-putting for people. It really is one of the best DreamWorks movies, though I'll still say The Prince of Egypt is their magnum opus. That is one of the other ones that is definitely in the top 3 for me. And then for the other one, I'm not entirely sure what the other one in the top 3 would be for me. I want to say Kung Fu Panda 2, but I'm not entirely sure. The most conflicting writing of the dog is the part where he lashes out. Are you talking about where he swears and stuff? Because I didn't really see that as him genuinely lashing out. That was him trying to participate with everyone else. Him trying to fit in, because that was part of how how Goldie and the bears sort of got along. Certainly Goldie and the baby bear. How to Train Your Dragon 1 is also fantastic. I don't think it would go into the top 3 for me. Similar situation with Kung Fu Panda 1. I think Kung Fu Panda 1 is excellent, but I think Kung Fu Panda 2 is a bit better. And I think there was something that I was forgetting. I thought there was another DreamWorks movie that was excellent that's just not coming to mind right now. The soundtrack to How to Train Your Dragon is very, very good, yes. Yes, I agree, backseat, but I mean, he also was he was put in a sock with a rock and attempted to be drowned, so once that was said, I didn't really have a problem. Like, I find it hard to see anything that he misses as being problematic. Oh, that's right, Shrek. I've only seen Shrek 2 once or twice. I'm not sure whether Shrek 1 or 2 would, I feel like Shrek 1 or 2 would be the other one in there. Misses the understanding. He misses the understanding of it because he's so his perspective on the world is such that I don't think he's able to really fully understand it himself because he does not personally experience it. However, he does understand the emotions enough in order to help with the emotions when they're there. The Puss's anxiety attack being the main example, I would say, of where he's able to demonstrate that. He can't understand in any way what Puss is going through, but he realizes that maybe Puss needs some help. But yeah, I would say, given that the Shrek movies are in there, I don't know. I want to watch the second one again. Yes, Road to El Dorado is also DreamWorks, but let's be real, that wouldn't be going in any top lists. The main two characters are fantastic and the introduction is wonderful, but movie as a whole, you know, Not necessarily, because his character arc does not actually have to be about understanding what happened to him. It can be about understanding how to help others. That wouldn't make for a good main character, because then if you have a main character who has an arc that's about others, then that doesn't really help very much. But as a side character, as a supporting character, I think that works fantastically. And also, not all characters have to have arcs. An argument could be made that he is the iconic character that has already figured it out. The old mentor, maybe, right? And what he actually is he's there to be the mascot, beacon, emblem, paragon, whatever you want to call it, for the other characters in the movie. Well, he certainly can't help them fix their own problems, but doesn't mean he can't help. In general, yes, except one of the most beautiful things I think that can happen is that people can end up helping each other even when they don't have their own life figured out. That doesn't mean they're in a place where they should be trying to, but you never know. something that doesn't mean much to you can mean the world to someone else. Just because you haven't learned a particular lesson doesn't mean that you can't help someone with learning that lesson. You could theoretically be a bad example. I could definitely see how that could be frustrating. I've only seen the movie once, so I can't speak with too much conviction about the details and the nuance, because I've only seen it the one time. Maybe when I watch it the next time I'll see a bit more of what you're talking about. For me though, the idea of it doesn't bother me too much because I believe the dog, and I see it as being something where there are certain conveniences that need to happen because it's a film. They don't have a lot of time to do things, so they have to keep things on track. And so there's only so much complexity you can get into, but that does not mean that it is lesser for it. Jack as a villain is an excellent villain. He is very one-dimensional, but he is entertaining and serves his purpose. And if anyone were to say that he's a bad villain, I would have some words with them. Oh, definitely. But I think you don't need to have something be idyllic in order for it to be valuable. Like, yes, did the bear and Goldie fight a bit too much? Did it go a bit too far? Absolutely. But I can definitely say that, I've seen many situations and been in many situations where fights go a bit too far, but that doesn't mean that the thing itself isn't precious. No, that is fair. They were definitely being pretty toxic. Alright, now that makes sense. The movie definitely leaned into its PG rating. The swearing, the violence, the fear. Like, just death alone. I know that if I watched that movie as a child, that death would keep me up at night. He would get into my dreams. I could totally see it being something where I would be having a regular dream about something completely different, and then I'd just hear the whistle. But that's a fair bit of talking about Puss in Boots 2. I want to make sure it doesn't dominate the space or the conversation. If there's anything else that anyone wants to talk about, please go for it. Oh wait, that's right, I need to make sure that... Alright. Actually, I want to test something out here. Let me know how this works for you. For one, can any of you hear this when I type? Does that get picked up by the mic much? Seems like it does. Alright. Fantastic. So, something I've always wanted to try is using writing as a form of ASMR. Strictly me trying to double dip as far as getting writing done while also doing content for you guys. I'm not entirely sure how this will work, so if it ends up being something where I can't effectively multitask, then I'll stop and go to something else. Right now, I'm jotting down a few ideas for well, not necessarily a story per se, more let's just say I love Firefly and I find the ragtag crew manning a ship as they try and make a living in space very, very engaging. So while I'm doing this, why don't you all tell me a bit more about how you're doing? Any plans for the week? Any plans for Valentine's Day? Holiday starts Friday for me, so just relaxing is good planning. Nice. The need to actively relax, I think, is one of the things that caused me to get the idea to do a stream like this in the first place. I don't know, there's something about doing actually nothing. Like, there are times when I would be playing, like, video games or something, or doing a TTRPG with some friends, but that's not quite the same as just actually doing nothing. Hang on a minute. I'm going to adjust this. Alright. Oh yeah. I really love community activities. I do too. Journey and Abzu are very chill vibe games. Okay, good to know. If Caleb can do multiplayer Hollow Knight, well, that would probably be better to ask Caleb. I wouldn't know myself. But if you're asking if like the two of us would play Hollow Knight together, probably not. Yeah, I couldn't tell you. Oh wait. Is that actually bad ASMR to have like cracking knuckles and stuff? I know a lot of people don't like the sound, so let me know if that's something that made you cringe when you heard it. Also, what would be a good name for a spaceship? I always have trouble with names. I'm looking, the ship is it is a space transport. It is very large, big dump truck of a spaceship. For reference, my hankering to write this particular piece came from playing Elite Dangerous. Because I had so much fun just getting a big fat dumpy of a ship and then ferrying goods between planets, and so I'm kind of using that for the inspiration. Usual piece of junk ship type deal, except unlike the Millennium Falcon, this actually is a piece of junk. But it's huge and super slow and lumbering. And, yeah. It's based off of, if you remember in The Empire Strikes Back, the transports that the rebels used to leave Hoth, that is kind of what I'm going for as far as the vibe. Slow as balls, and just carries a lot of stuff, no weapons whatsoever, not sleek or fun to look at. All I can think of is space-time event, because relativity class I'm taking. Okay. Well, here's the description that I have going for it so far. This is of course very rough. So, well, here's what I've got so far. The description kind of blends into it, but basically pirates force the ship out of FTL. Their prey burst through the opening, forced out of faster than light travel, and now crawling along, helpless on its outdated and overworked thrusters. The old girl bore a closer resemblance to a squashed block of steel than a ship, ugly as hell and with a cargo capacity pushing 20,000 metric tons. There wasn't room for much else, least of all weapons. That's the description that I have for it so far. This is a fun wine. I probably should have checked to see if it was something Caleb was saving for a special occasion. I don't think it was, though. It's jet black is what it says on the bottle. You probably can't read it from there. But it's pretty tasty. I just realized I've been doing everything on one monitor, but I don't actually have display capture up, so I don't have to do that. just, I'll do a placeholder name for now. The something. The Big Dumpy. No, Starbound Legacy sounds too serious. Only thing that comes to mind is a garbage scow. Well, Chameleon, I don't actually know what that is. The big ships that transport garbage. That is actually not far from what I'm going for, yeah. Transport garbage or just big, shipping containers. Rusty Voyager. I like Rust. Maybe. Alright, if it's something that travels on the sea, maybe something involving like a whale, you know? Because whales are giant things that, generally, like they're not like the predators of the sea. They're not sharks or anything like that. Just a big thing that just goes around like Millennium Falcon, right? You've got a space filler word, and then you've got falcon, fast bird of prey. There you go. Also, what was it? Most combat sea vessels seem to be almost unilaterally, from what I recall, at least in Elite Dangerous, but I believe that's something that's a real thing, or named after snakes. So like anaconda, rattlesnake, things like that. Cobra. But a whale. Speaking of whales, have any of you watched the K-drama on Netflix, I believe it is, called Extraordinary Attorney Woo? I've only seen a few episodes so far, but it's very sweet. It revolves around this young lady that is autistic, but she ends up becoming a lawyer. And it's really sweet because you have all of the serialized, fiction, okay, there's a case, all that stuff, but it revolves basically, for the most part, around her ability to express herself and connect with the people that she's working with or that are part of, are the clients or the jury or the judge. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to get character focus while at the same time having, some basic conflict. CS Neutron, thank you for the Twitch Prime sub, and this is for the first month. I will tell you, if you sync up your Twitch and Discord accounts, you can get access to our private Discord that is usually just for Patreon patrons or Twitch subscribers. Because I'm talking so softly, I need to make sure that I actually enunciate my words properly. Caleb needs his headphones. Hang on a sec. A bit of a peek behind the curtain for how things go here. F555 Warriors. Yes, I've watched Woo. Have you watched Crash Landing on You or Goblin? I don't think I've seen either of those two. So it's Crash Landing on You, that's the title of one, and then just Goblin is the next? Or is that whole thing Crash Landing on You or Goblin the name? Long-time Patreon sub, just stopping by on Twitch journey? Well, welcome. Glad you're here. Let me know what you think, what you like, what you don't like. This is a new thing for me, so very much just, give feedback. Let me know what works. Yeah. 2 different shows, okay. I will say there's a part of it that feels weird having a mic this close to my face, because since it's so close, in order to get, the whole, that nice, up-close sound, I have to, actually, move to the side if I want to adjust, otherwise I'll hit the mic. And this is something that we definitely don't do for YouTube recordings because, that would be kind of problematic to have a mic this close when you're reacting and going crazy and all that. Indeed, Tenroku, but right now we're just doing chill vibes. So no darkness. Well, the darkness is, it's like Dark Souls darkness. It's quiet and comforting. No imprisoning. Have you thought about doing readings? I have. I wonder how that works with regards to, obviously I don't want to just read books wholesale, unless they're my own. I would not mind doing that. Actually, I could just get Battle Lines and we could do a reading of Battle Lines if you were interested. But I get the feeling not all of you might be interested in that. Let me know if you are, though. I have a copy I could go grab. The Wayfarer. Ooh, I like that name. I like that name. Yeah, because ideally I would want the name to be something that communicates something about the characters. What kind of things were you thinking about, CS Neutron, with regards to readings? What do people usually read? Travels on foot, which is slow. Nice. And potentially goes long distances. Alright. That definitely has a better ring to it than the Big Dumpy. That's what I would call my transport in Elite Dangerous when I was playing with a friend. Because those ships can get slow as balls. No longer human, turn into a depression stream? What's no longer human? I'm not familiar with that. If you're still doing ASMR, could do short classics that are public domain. That is a good point. Do not leave live read no longer human. Okay, good to know. Oh, that's right. Yes, I know about this. Because I heard about it before we watched the show. But yes. Bungo Stray Dogs. What's his name? The main guy. His ability's named after that. Yeah, short classics that are in public domain. Dazai, that's right. Osamu Dazai, I think. Let's see, short classic fiction in the public domain. Jacob Reads Poetry to chat, I'd be up for it. Sherlock Holmes, but we don't want that. Poe, that could work. Read you The Pit and the Pendulum or something. Ernest Hemingway could be fun. The Emperor's New Clothes. Wait, are Agatha Christie short stories in public domain? Well, short stories, not necessarily full books. Could always do Dickens, Grimm's Fairy Tales. Welcome, Impade. Not answering questions about other things of that nature right now. Just vibes. Everything else in the world just doesn't exist right now. How long is The Emperor's New Clothes? That's actually fairly long. The Raven? Sure. Oh wait, that one's actually pretty long too. I think you'd get a lot of mileage in general out of poetry, philosophy, or fairy tales. Alright, good to know. Good to know. Thank you. Alright, so let's try The Emperor's New Clothes. Alright, close your eyes with me, and let's go on a journey. Many years ago, there was an emperor who was so very fond of new clothes that he spent all his money on them. He did not trouble about his soldiers. He did not care to go to the theater. He only went out when he had the chance to show off his new clothes. He had a different suit for each hour of the day. Most kings could be found sitting in council. It was said of the emperor, "He is sitting in his wardrobe." One day, two fellows calling themselves weavers came to town. They said that they knew how to weave cloth of the most beautiful colors and patterns. The clothes made from this wonderful cloth would be invisible to everyone who was unfit for the job he held, or who was very simple in character. These must indeed be splendid clothes, thought the emperor. If I had such a suit, I might at once find out what men in my kingdom are unfit for their job. I would be able to tell the wise men from the foolish. This stuff must be woven for me immediately. He gave large sums of money to both the weavers in order that they might begin their work at once. So the two pretend weavers set up two looms. They worked very, very busily, though in reality they did nothing at all. They asked for the finest silk and the purest gold thread. They put both into their own knapsacks. Then they pretended to work at the empty looms until late at night. "I should like to know how the weavers are getting on with my cloth," said the emperor to himself one day. When he remembered that a simpleton, or one unfit for his job, would be unable to see the cloth, he began to worry. To be sure, he thought he was safe. However, he would prefer sending somebody else to bring him news about the weavers and their work. All the people in the kingdom had heard of the wonderful cloth. All were eager to learn how wise or how foolish their neighbors might be. "I will send my faithful old wise man to the weavers," said the emperor at last. "He will be best able to see how the cloth looks. He is a man of sense." No one can be better for his job than he is." So the faithful old wise man went into the hall where the thieves were working with all of their might at their empty looms. "What can be the meaning of this?" thought the old man, opening his eyes very wide. "I cannot find the least bit of thread on the looms." However, he did not say his thoughts out loud. The thieves asked him very kindly to be so good as to come nearer their looms. Then they asked him whether the cloth pleased him. They asked whether the colors were not very beautiful. All the time they were pointing to the empty looms. The poor old wise man looked and looked. He could not see anything on the looms for a very good reason. There was nothing there. The thieves asked him very kindly, "What?" thought he again. "Is it possible that I am a fool? I have never thought so myself. No one must know it now if I am so. Can it be that I am unfit for my job? No, the Emperor must not know that either. I will never tell that I could not see the stuff." "Well, sir," said one of the weavers, still pretending to work, "you do not say whether the cloth pleases you." "Oh, it is excellent," replied the old wise man, looking at the loom through his spectacles. "Of this pattern and the colors, yes. I will tell the Emperor without delay how very beautiful I think them." "We shall be much obliged to you," said the thieves. Then they named the many colors and described the pattern of the pretended stuff. The old wise man listened with care to their words so he might repeat them to the Emperor. The thieves asked for more silk and gold, saying that it was necessary to complete what they had begun. Once they put all that was given them in their knapsacks, they went on working with as much effort as before at their empty looms. The Emperor soon sent another man from his court to see how the weavers were getting on. Now he wanted to know if the cloth would soon be ready. It was just the same with this gentleman as with the wise man. First, he looked closely at the looms on all sides. He could see nothing at all but the empty frames. "Does not the stuff appear as beautiful to you as it did to my lord the wise man?" asked the thieves of the Emperor's second advisor. "I certainly am not stupid," thought the man. "It must be that I am not fit for my good job. That is very odd. However, no one shall know anything about it." And so he praised the stuff he could not see. He declared that he was happy with both colors and patterns. "Indeed, your Imperial Majesty," he said to his Emperor when he returned, "the cloth which the weavers are preparing is extraordinarily magnificent." The whole city was talking of the splendid cloth which the Emperor had ordered to be woven. Finally, the Emperor himself wished to see the costly material while it was still on the loom. He took many officers of the court and the two honest men who had already admired the cloth. As soon as the weavers saw the Emperor approach, they went on working faster than ever, although they still did not pass even one thread through the looms. "Is not the work absolutely magnificent?" said the two officers of the crown already mentioned. "If your Majesty will only be pleased to look at it, what a splendid design, what glorious colors!" And at the same time they pointed to the empty frames, for they imagined that everyone else could see this exquisite piece of workmanship. "How is this?" said the Emperor to himself. "I can see nothing. This is indeed a terrible affair. Am I a simpleton, or am I unfit to be an emperor? That would be the worst thing that could happen. Oh, the cloth is charming," he said aloud. "I approve of it completely." He smiled most graciously and looked closely at the empty looms. No way would he say that he could not see what two of his advisors had praised so much. Everyone with the Emperor now strained his or her eyes, hoping to discover something on the looms, but they could see no more than the others. Nevertheless, they all exclaimed, "Oh, how beautiful!" and advised His Majesty to have some new clothes made from this splendid material for the parade that was planned. "Magnificent, charming, excellent," was called out on all sides. Everyone was very cheerful. The Emperor was pleased. He presented the weavers with the emblem of an order of knighthood. The thieves sat up the whole of the night before the day on which the parade was to take place. They had 16 lights burning, so that everyone might see how anxious they were to finish the emperor's new suit. They pretended to roll the cloth off the looms. They cut the air with their scissors, and sewed with needles without any thread in them. "See," they cried at last, "the emperor's new clothes are ready." Wait just a sec. This over. The emperor, with all the grandees of his court, came to the weavers. The thieves raised their arms as if in the act of holding something up. "Here are your majesty's trousers. Here is the scarf. Here is the mantle. The whole suit is as light as a cobweb. One might fancy one has nothing at all on when dressed in it." "Yes, indeed," said all the courtiers, although not one of them could see anything of this special cloth. The emperor was undressed for a fitting, and the thieves pretended to array him in his new suit. The emperor turned around from side to side before the looking-glass. "How splendid His Majesty looks in his new clothes, and how well they fit," everyone cried out. "What a design, what colors! These are indeed royal robes." "I am quite ready," said the emperor. He appeared to be examining his handsome suit. The lords of the bedchamber, who were to carry His Majesty's train, felt about on the ground as if they were lifting up the ends of the mantle. Then they pretended to be carrying something, for they would by no means want to appear foolish or not fit for their jobs. The emperor walked under his high canopy in the midst of the procession, through the streets of his capital. All the people standing by and those at the windows cried out, "Oh, how beautiful are our emperor's new clothes! What a magnificent train there is to the mantle, and how gracefully the scarf hangs!" No one would admit that these much-admired clothes could not be seen, because, in doing so, he would have been saying he was either a simpleton or unfit for his job. "But the emperor has nothing at all on," said a little child. Listen to the voice of the child," exclaimed his father. What the child had said was whispered from one to another. "But he has nothing at all on," at last cried out all of the people. The emperor was upset, for he knew that the people were right. However, he thought the procession must go on now. The lords of the bedchamber took greater pains than ever to appear holding up a train, although, in reality, there was no train to hold. The emperor walked on in his underwear. China version, child evaporated next day. Wait, really? Seriously? Hachikuji first arc is just a retelling of the emperor's new clothes, huh? Wait, what? Hachikuji's first arc? Are you talking when she's introduced with the snail? Oh, well. Senjo pretends to see Hachikuji so she doesn't feel like the odd one. That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. Glad you liked Bad Weather. Glad you liked it. Alright. That was fun. We can do something else like that if you want, or we can do something a bit different. The Derelict is a ship name. I kind of like it. Although, feel like that's just a little bit much. I'd be surprised if anyone actually named their ship the Derelict, you know? The Forgotten Rust. See, I like the idea of there being something on there like, the rust bucket or something like that, but And now that I think about it, the Wayfarer I like the Wayfarer as an idea, but it feels a bit, it doesn't feel very marketable. Like, it wants something that captures that same energy, but feels distinct. Like, I don't know if the personality of this ship could truly capture just the word Wayfarer to where people hear Wayfarer and think of a spaceship. Maybe add something to it. Although that's pretty loud, so I probably don't have to have it actually that close to the mic. Thank you, CS Neutron. Thank you. I'm not sure how much of it is my voice versus just these mics. The mics are quite nice. And having the mic close to the face really helps a lot. Generally just makes you sound bassier. Alright. Let's see here. Alright, so now we need a name for a ship captain. And this can't be like a badass name. This needs to be like salt of the earth kind of name. Maybe someone with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. In my TTRPGs, the ship names I keep using are Susan Constant, like the real world ship, the Red Dragon, and the Floating Shepherd. Huh. Let's see. One of my favorite naming conventions, even if it's in fantastical or sci-fi, is to take a word that already exists, that has a particular connotation, and use that for the name. So, for instance, split, or Kane, although that's just a name. Some people are named Kane. Or like Sawyer, but like use Sawyer as like a girl's name. What would be the other examples of it? Slate. That's a fun one. Kingdom Hearts is chock full of it. What, of crazy names? But all those names are actually, hang on. Sawyer's great for a sailor. It's like Porsche or Vincent. Well, I can't use Sawyer for this one because I already have a character named Sawyer and they have a very distinct feel. And Porsche or Vincent I do like as ideas. Maybe Vincent could work as... Wait a minute. Hang on. I think I might already have a character in one of my other stories named Vince. Yeah, I do. I do. Name another one, Finn. That could be funny. And in a different story, that probably wouldn't be an issue. Let's see. Wait a minute, actually, here's a question. Beard scratching. Does the mic pick that up? Because that could be kind of funny. I naturally have an ASMR tool on my face. Cool. Beards are fun. I would have such a baby face if I didn't have a beard. Oh, not anymore. Okay. Yeah, I couldn't see it on the OBS setup. Usually it's like, yeah, no, not picking it up at all. Maybe if have I gone with no facial hair before? Yes, a long time ago. That would have been back when I was maybe 17, 18. That would have been the last time I had no beard. Yeah. Now that I think about it, yeah, that is a very long time. It's a solid 10 years. I'm picking it up when you're talking. Yeah, that's probably what I need to do. Is if I'm talking, then, the mic is picking things up and then it doesn't have to, filter things out. And then you can feel the beard scratching. Yeah. Where did the inspiration for an ASMR stream come from? Well, first off, welcome, Elsan. Welcome. Happy to have you here. The inspiration came from a while back. I was just really stressed out and just stuff, life, things like that. And I ended up stumbling onto some YouTube videos that I had seen before that were just like those 8-hour, 10-hour rain and piano sounds. I love the sound of rain, always have. The fact that I live in the Seattle area is kind of perfect, actually. And from there I was like, okay, I really like this just having ambient sounds on. It's fun, it's comforting, it's soothing. And then from there it wasn't a big step into ASMR. Even though I haven't actually, I stepped into a VTuber's ASMR stream once. But that's it. Other than that, I don't really have much experience with it, but, I always thought it was kind of fun how you can get really close to a mic and then your voice sounds like super awesome. And so I was like, hey, I've been doing a lot of experiments with streams lately because I want to sort of, stretch myself a little bit and see what kind of stream content I can do. Not pigeonhole myself into just playing games or things like that. So I was like, hey, why not try ASMR? And I've generally gotten a lot more comfortable on stream recently too. That is another reason why I wanted to do this kind of stuff. Because, just kind of get more comfortable with being on camera. It can be tough sometimes because with the reactions, you're being emotionally vulnerable on camera in front of who knows how many people, and they're strangers. And that can be hard because it's a whole thing. And so it's so with there was always this safety net that theoretically, if I really didn't want some part of myself to be shown, I could always, like, if I really wanted to, just ask the editor to cut out a bit from the reaction, full length, even if I really wanted to. But with live streams, you can't do that. And so there was a lot of, I would get very nervous and just sort of tense when I would be live. Because, one, live, but two, by myself. I don't know how solo reactors do it. Being able to have a conversation go, and streamers too, really. When it's just you don't have someone to play off of. Yes, streamers can play off of chat, but that's different, and you can't always rely on chat to actually be like a good improv partner, if you know what I mean. No offense, chat. Whereas like Caleb and I, we vibe really well. I've known Caleb my whole life. So doing something like this, it's a bit different. It's a bit out there, and so I wanted to try it and see how it went. And so this is one example. But yeah, Ceres Fauna is actually just Jacob. What is that? Ceres Fauna. Oh, it's a VTuber. That's awesome. That's great. I'll have to check them out. Cool. Let's see. She does ASMR a lot. Little joke. Okay. That is also true, Elsan. Yes. Yes. Given that I talk for a living, having little exercises to control my voice is something that I find helpful. It's certainly not going to hurt anything. But yeah. It's nice to just have something that's a vibe. Just, and not a vibe like a passive vibe. I feel like it's very easy to get into just sort of like, I don't know. Having something that's an active vibe where it's just, hey, we're doing this, we're hanging out. There's some extra things to kind of make it interesting, But it's still just kind of chilling. Alright. So, before the stream started, I started this cup of tea steeping, and I left the bag in there this entire time. Let's see how it is. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I know. It's weird though. Once you go to a big mug like this, you can't really go back. It's really hard because I don't have to get more. Like, can you imagine how inconvenient it would be if instead of a 50-ounce mug, I had an 8-ounce mug, or even a 12 or 16? I would need to refill it so much. Well, the thing is, some of you may remember I used to just use a Pyrex 4-cup measuring cup for my tea on camera, This is that, but better. Iroh did have it right. Tea is wonderful. I mean, hot chocolate's great too, but like, can't have hot chocolate all the time. You can have tea all the time. Yes, that can be a problem, Elsan, but I can drink liquids very quickly. Although it does still get cold sometimes, which is unfortunate. Yes, exactly. I'm getting my curls in. Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Iced tea is also wonderful too, so if the tea ever gets too cold, you just pour it over ice. There you go. Boom. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Brings a new meaning to kettlebells. Oh wait, hang on. Hang on a second. So, one of the things that Caleb and I have over the course of 7 years doing reactions, thousands of videos, right? Is just how much little changes in lighting happen because of what windows we have up, right? Because we're like close to the monitors, we're not like one of the reaction channels where they might be like far away and on a couch or something, or have like a, and have like a TV or something. So, just having something like just doing something like this. Wait, hang on. Just doing something like this changes the lighting, right? Anyway. Wait, hang on. I've literally used that to sync timer reactions before, really? That is amazing. That's great. Like, there's so many different steps and things that we have for like our recordings. We have it down to like a science, either a science or like black magic, like Naruto, like hand gestures and stuff, to make it all be like exactly the way that we like are used to it being. There was literally a point when we were going to be recording and Caleb would just stopped and he was like, wait, something's off. Are we forgetting something? Are all the settings right? And I'm like, yeah. And what it was is that I had left my game controller in here from the previous night's stream. And it, like, because everything is used to being so exactly the same, that suddenly that just one extra thing being in his field of vision was like, hang on, something's off. I have not seen the new Harry Potter game. I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan. I definitely respect it for what it did for bringing people into reading in general. But I'm not a Potter fan per se. Although I've heard it's really good, and from what I've seen of it, it does look pretty gorgeous. And the idea of having an in-depth game, even if it is Harry Potter universe, which isn't my favorite for like wizards and stuff. An actual game that goes in depth with going to wizard school does sound pretty freaking awesome. Oh yeah, it's a super old series. Yeah. Noita is a great magic-oriented game. I'll have to check that out. Let's see. Ooh, it's a roguelite. I do like roguelites. Every pixel is physically simulated. Might explore, melt, burn, freeze, and evaporate your way through. Okay. Alright, that sounds fun. Huh. That's cool. Although, I feel like... So... Gotcha. I mean, that does sound like a fun game premise. Most of the time, though, when I think of magic, the part that excites me isn't as much the, actually, hang on. The mechanics can definitely excite me, but when I think of, for a game, it's not as much the mechanics. In a book, I absolutely want there to be those mechanics, but because a game is so visual, I want it to be more about the aesthetic of the magic, if that makes sense. So, like, replaying Elden Ring, Ronnie's whole design is a vibe. It's just wonderful. Like, it reminded me how awesome the witch with the big hat aesthetic is. Just chef's kiss, right? Like, yeah. Noita is proof that magic scales with intelligence, because if you're not intelligent, you'll end up killing yourself more than the enemies with your custom spells. Custom spells does sound very fun. I do like the idea of that. I might have to check it out then, because that's the thing that always kind of, it's one of the things that always kind of frustrated me about Harry Potter. Also, Joel Dell, thank you for the follow. And thank you, Sun Hodor, for the follow. If you are going to a school where you're learning magic, especially as a wizard, not like if you're doing something where the idea is that it's based on intelligence, right? It's an actual skill that can be learned. It's not just, it's not like an emotion-based magic or something, even though that could still be used in this way, but why don't we see the characters make their own spells and just do crazy shit like that? Like, in Harry Potter, I think the closest that we ever got was Hermione doing stuff. But in the books where it would happen, you never could really tell if it was because she was making up the spell, or if because since she was so bookish, she was doing spells that they hadn't been taught yet. Yes, backseat. That is, Well, let's be real. That's actually one of the most sensible things in Harry Potter, probably. Because you don't want to be teaching 12-year-olds attack spells. That sounds like a very bad idea. They're in a school. It isn't America. Well, so there's a... If you know me, you probably... Well, there's a decent chance you know that I'm a big fan of TTRPG actual play series, like Critical Role and Dimension 20. Dimension 20 has one that is a ton of fun called Misfits and Magic. And it is basically what would happen if you had No, not Hogwarts in Ohio, but if you had American exchange students go to Hogwarts, and how much that would absolutely throw everything way off, right? And it's not just about them being from America, it's also like hey, let's actually take realism and apply it to Hogwarts and see how everything falls apart, right? It's only like 4 sessions long, because obviously something like that wouldn't be able to last very long. But it is a ton of fun. It is absolutely great. Yes, why guns are never used is very odd. Well, and magical firearms also can just be dope as shit. Like, let's be real, the aesthetic is beautiful. But, one of the specific one that I always wanted to see in Harry Potter, and if you watched my Dark Souls 3 streams, you might know this one. Why don't they ever teleport while in combat? Like, if you can disapparate, I get that you can't do that in Hogwarts, but even Dumbledore could, so, theoretically that could be, that could be worked around. But when you're not at Hogwarts, why don't you apparate while fighting? You're about to cast a magic spell on someone, and oh hey, when they're about to block it because it's coming from a particular direction, you apparate to behind them and shoot them from behind. Like, that makes sense, right? You can't open map in combat in Elden Ring, exactly. Yes, Kiritsugu from Fate understood it best. Magic and gun. Very good. Well, it's not a ritual spell that takes too long, though, because we see them do it in the movies and in the books. It's a fast thing. It doesn't take that long. The only way I could see it being potentially different is if it's, you can only cast one thing at a time because you have one wand. But if that's the case, why don't people just use 2 wands? Why don't they get a second one? Yes, there's a bond, but what about wand polygamy? Like, come on. Or polyamory? Yeah. Harry Potter mages don't have anti-physical attack defense, do they? Not as a baseline, no. Yes, in Dresden Files, Harry Dresden does carry a revolver with him, although I get the feeling that's more just because he likes the aesthetic, right? Because, let's be real, Harry Dresden, not Harry Potter, basically just blows everything up anyway with his fire spells. So, a gun wouldn't help too much. And oftentimes, it's something where it's like, oh, he's up against a really big creature where a gun wouldn't actually help too much, But that's a great point, Mark Twisk. Yeah, just because you theoretically could use both your hands, 2 wands at the same time, doesn't mean you'd necessarily be good at it. That is true. Mm-hmm. More of a distraction to give him time to cast, sure. Scared of Voldemort? Bro, just deck him in the face. I mean, someone did it at some point. That's why he doesn't have a nose, right? Yeah. I mean, one-hand staff, one-hand gun. Gandalf did it with a sword, so it makes sense that if you were in the modern times, you'd do it. Magical railgun, yeah. Okay. Female spaceship captain's name. As an example of names that I think work really well for something like this, but obviously, can't use it because it's already taken. Tess from The Last of Us. That, I think, is a fantastic name. It's short, so it's, 1 syllable, easy to say, rolls off the tongue, is distinct enough that if someone says Tess, you don't necessarily have to know Last of Us, right? Probably helpful, but you don't necessarily have to, right? If someone says Joel, now Joel's not really special because of the name, but more just because Joel and Ellie, it's like, there you go. But Jin. Yeah, I don't, in a sci-fi, I feel like that doesn't quite work. Or combine a magic staff with a hunting rifle and broomstick. There's an anime that does that. I watched like an episode or two. Is it of The Last Witch, I want to say? I could be wrong. I might be getting it mixed up. I know that is the name of an anime, but there was one where they basically, cute girls bewitching, but they fly around on anti-tank rifles. I have not seen that SNL skit yet, no. That does make sense. That does make a lot of practical sense, FN. Yeah. Like, why have two big sticks you need to carry around? Also, something else I've always wanted to see. If you have wands being magical, right? Why don't you, tie it around your forearm or make, a rotating wand Gatling gun, Especially if it's, a D&D style wand where it's, pre-charged with stuff, You get, your fireball wand, your paralysis wand, your magic missiles wand, and you just set them up in, a tri thing that just, cycles between them. Gatling gun wand is also a thing you can do in Noita. Nice. Nice. Or have an exoskeleton made of wands become a wand yourself. I mean, yeah, there you go, It'd be cool if wands and staffs as magic focuses had different effects. Well, if you play Pathfinder 1E, not wands and staffs. In Pathfinder 1E, there's rods, which do something specific where they give you basically a meta magic feat effect onto a spell. If you know what meta magic feats are, they basically alter spells, so. Okay, so I'll give you a bit more context for this scene. So, okay. It was an idea for a scene that I had. It's like an introduction to a story. I don't know if this would be a story I would ever write seriously, right? But I always had this idea of what if you had someone who, I was trying to think of ways that you could basically take space travel and basic delivery missions, and make it be something where it would be engaging, you wouldn't have to worry about pirates, and you could see this person actually doing this as their job, right? And I had this idea, and that's kind of where some of this came from, of what if you had someone that was, or what if you had a ship that carried enough cargo that you could get the really cheap stuff with the low profit margins? I know you're probably already snoring and going to sleep from hearing this. So that pirates wouldn't want your shit because it was too cheap, right? Because it's a giant ass ship, it's what, they get a bunch of granola bars or something. It's like, no, they don't want that. Space Costco, exactly. Yeah, basically a space Costco truck, right? And then use that as like the basis for it. And I had this image in my head of like them still getting stopped by pirates and being like, "Hey, we want your shit." And then they just get onto the ship, and it's like they just pop a bottle of champagne, and they're like, "All right, you're the new person. Welcome. Nice to meet you. Let's share a drink." Yeah, we don't have anything actually valuable. Take a look if you want, but it's all like, here's the roster. It's all just like, very cheap shit. And that's pretty much it. There you go. Have a nice day. We'll see you next time. Feel free to take some stuff if you want. But that was the other thing. If the pirates do take stuff, because like if you think about it, a ship built for like speed and combat and all that stuff probably isn't going to have as much space on it as like something that like one of those big like cargo container ships on the ocean, right? So even if they do take some stuff, it's not actually going to hurt the bottom line of the ship very much, because it's like, okay, you took 5% of our cargo. Darn, like, okay. But yeah. And so I had this idea of, as a way to aggressively introduce that as an idea to the audience, you start opening scene. Pirates pulling a ship out of light speed, right? Out of faster than light. And so it's like, ooh, this is going to be like an action thing or whatever, right? Pirates are like, do the usual thing of like, all right, stop, we're going to take all your shit. And then, but the people aren't responding to the threats, and so the pirates are kind of confused. They're like, wait, what? And then they're like, oh, wait. Oh, I'm not sure how much I should share about this, but then I had this idea that basically you hard cut from the pirates being like trying to hold up the ship to the captain basically just getting railed on the bridge, because it's like, whatever, this is fairly normal, and then the pirates are just basically an inconvenient interruption. And sorry, by the way, if you're like, wait, I was not expecting to hear about that kind of stuff in this just chill, stream and all that. What if the pirates commandeer the big ship and just take all the cargo anyway instead of taking 5%? So, the thing that you have for that is, 1, ships slow as balls. 2, if it's actually like, oh, no, this was it. You just put a self-destruct on the ship. There you go, right? Okay, you could take it if you want, but then you don't get anything. And if that happens, then it's actually more likely that you might get people that would like come after you, because then you did, like your crime is bigger, right? Whereas as opposed to if you just stick us up and skim some stuff off the top, whatever. That happens all the time. But that is a good point to bring up, Alien, yeah. Space private company, please gonna come after them or whatever. Yeah, something more or less like that. Because I would figure in a situation where you can have space pirates that are very much like an active problem, right? Gotta keep things exciting, a little bit of a Wild West, right? Space is a big open place. Things aren't perfectly being monitored. But there are, those people are still out there, right? So it's more of a question of how do you stay one step ahead of the law, right? And for the most part, it's pretty easy, But if it becomes a big issue, then it's like, okay, well, maybe don't do that. Yes, that was the other thing. Yeah, Protags themselves are small fry, but they work for Big Corpo, shipping stuff for them. Yep, yep. And so it's like okay, yes, you could, but like Corpo has no problem with you taking 5% because that's not even tipping your waiter. It's like that's a small little thing. That's like with the balance sheet and how everything works out, they're still in the black just fine. But if you actually like destroy one of their ships or steal their ships, then that's a problem. And if you think about it, if it's on stuff that's low profit margin, the pirates would still actually make out pretty well because they would be getting the 5% of the cargo for free. So it wouldn't be like the net profit, it'd be pure profit. Even if they have to sell it at some cheaper rate or something like that, to offload it at a fence. But yeah, this kind of mechanical stuff is just stuff that I really enjoy thinking about when I think about stories in different worlds and stuff. Because it's just one of those things where you don't want to have a story be entirely about it, because then that'd be super boring. But if you have those little details in there, just to show that this is thought out, this does actually work, this is a living, breathing world, then it makes it a lot more engaging for me. Ship Suicide Squad. I mean, that's why we like the ragtag anti-heroes, right? Or reluctant heroes, or however they end up, being in the story. And if it's something where you can get really attached to the actual, ship itself, then it's great. You've got a moving base, you've got a moving home, that the audience starts to care about, and there you go. You can have a situation like, people getting attached to Hogwarts or something, right? But you don't have to have the cost of then not being able to go to a bunch of exciting different places because it's traveling. What if the ship had onboard AI voice that personified it a bit? That is also a lot of fun. I'm definitely a fan of that. I really like what Mass Effect did in its game series with both virtual intelligence and artificial intelligence. Having EDI on the ship in Mass Effect 2 was a lot of fun. And then break the audience's heart when the ship inevitably gets destroyed. I mean, LPK. Yeah. If you've seen the movie Serenity, the end scene with the ship getting torn apart and, spears getting run through the wash. Yes, people were dying, but it was also the ship that was, dying, it was taking damage in the same way the crew was. And then, of course, there's the going merry. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we might say that, Oda's just, going off of a checklist of, what's all the crazy things I can get them to, cry over. But going merry's, fantastically executed. Not a fundamentally out there thing to do, though, Because of course they'd be invested in the ship, right? Of course. And then showing how the characters are also super invested in the ship is just, it's great. It's great. One sec, let me check something. since one was, it's not that we don't revisit series that we read online, but it's a whole thing. We might, don't know. One Piece is one of those ones where I think the desire would definitely be there, and it's a series that does work well with live readings. Other series, not so much. Like it takes a very specific type of series, I feel like, to actually work for a live manga reading. Otherwise, it's just not. It's not very engaging. It can be really hard to read if it's like not fun. Not fun. Not like it's not a fun story, but like not like it's not an engaging story. But if it's not a story that is full of fun, then it can be like Berserk, for instance. Very, very depressing, very dark, very heavy at a lot of times. Reading that for 3 hours, it's a bit rough. Holy shit, Morkwest, that is... Whoa. Good news, everyone. After a bit of embarrassing screaming, I escorted a Black Knight chats on the window. You got a Black Widow out of a room you sometimes sleep in. That is... that's terrifying. That... No. Yeah, that's... Don't need that. Are you gonna just like burn the whole place down? Just to be sure? I would have killed it. You're stronger than me. Yeah. Good thing Caleb's not here. Yep, exactly. Check something. Oh, oops. I realized I have desktop audio on, so if I go to something that'll autoplay anything, I need to be fast on the pause. Okay, how long did that? Okay. Hey Alex Booty, welcome to the stream. We're just chilling right now, you know? Yeah, just relaxing and just vibing. Hey, Morkdusk, if you've got a lot of adrenaline rush going through you right now, then, well, now you can just, hopefully try to forget that whole experience, because I know I would want to. And remember to let me know if there's any sounds you guys want to hear. Yeah, I saw a spider, so I threw a table at it. It survived, so I threw a cabinet. This continued. Alright, so I'm thinking I'm probably gonna have this keep going for another, like, I don't know, half hour or so. And I'm probably gonna wrap it up. So if there's anything that you guys in particular would like to see, hear, etc. before the stream ends, just let me know. Also, let me know if you would be interested in something like this happening again. Because this is new, and, you know, I could definitely be down, but I want to know what you guys think. Welcome, Titty Goblin. Ended off with another story. That does sound fun. Chill vibe streams in general, sure, but don't really care for ASMR specifically. Okay. Let's see. What's another short thing we could read? Oh yeah, this is definitely new, Ensign. Never tried this before. Ooh. I've got one. This is a favorite of mine. I want to say it's Hemingway, but I might be wrong. Jack London. I am quite sure this is public domain. Wait, which one is this though? There's a couple different versions. And this is a long one. Let's see. Here we go. Alright. Jacob, can you say the tongue twister from Batman v Superman 3 times fast? Funnel Fairy Butterbar, Funnel Fairy Butterbar, Funnel Fairy Butterbar? That? Okay, so this will be To Build a Fire by Jack London. This does have a bit of a sad ending, so just be aware. Day had broken, cold and gray, exceedingly cold and gray, when the man turned aside from the main Yukon Trail and climbed the high earth bank, where a dim and little-traveled trail led eastward through the fat spruce timberland. It was a steep bank, and he paused for breath at the top, excusing the act to himself by looking at his watch. It was 9 o'clock. There was no sun nor hint of sun, though there was not a cloud in the sky. It was a clear day, and yet there seemed an intangible pall over the face of things, a subtle gloom that made the day dark, and that was due to the absence of sun. This fact did not worry the man. He was used to the lack of sun. It had been days since he had seen the sun, and he knew that a few more days must pass before that cheerful orb due south would just peep above the skyline and dip immediately from view. The man flung a look back along the way he had come. The Yukon lay a mile wide and hidden under 3 feet of ice. On top of this ice were as many feet of snow. It was all pure white, rolling in gentle undulations where the ice jams of the freeze-up had formed. North and south, as far as his eye could see, it was unbroken white, save for a dark hairline that curved and twisted from around the spruce-covered island to the south, and that curved and twisted away to the north, where it disappeared behind another spruce-covered island. This dark hairline was the trail, the main trail, that led south 500 miles to the Chilkoot Pass, Daya, and Saltwater, and that led north 70 miles to Dawson, and still on to the north 1,000 miles to Nulato, and finally to St. Michael on Bering Sea, 1,000 miles and a half 1,000 more. But all this, the mysterious far-reaching hairline trail, the absence of sun from the sky, the tremendous cold, and the strangeness and weirdness of it all, made no impression on the man. It was not because he was long used to it. He was a newcomer in the land. I don't know how to pronounce this word. Chekakwo. And this was his first winter. The trouble with him was that he was without imagination. He was quick and alert in the things of life, but only in the things, and not in the significances. 50 degrees below zero meant 80-odd degrees of frost. Such fact impressed him as being cold and uncomfortable, and that was all. It did not lead him to meditate upon his frailty as a creature of temperature, and upon man's frailty in general, able only to live within certain narrow limits of heat and cold, and from there it did not lead him to the conjectural field of immortality and man's place in the universe. 50 degrees below zero stood for a bite of frost that hurt and that must be guarded against by the use of mittens, ear flaps, warm moccasins, and thick socks. 50 degrees below zero was to him just precisely 50 degrees below zero. That there should be anything more to it than that was a thought that never entered his head. As he turned to go on, he spat speculatively. There was a sharp, explosive crackle that startled him. He spat again, and again. In the air, before it could fall to the snow, the spittle crackled. He knew that at 50 below, spittle crackled on the snow, but this spittle had crackled in the air. Undoubtedly it was colder than 50 below. How much colder he did not know. But the temperature did not matter. He was bound for the old claim on the left fork of Henderson Creek, where the boys were already. They had come over across the divide from the Indian Creek country, while he had come the roundabout way to take a look at the possibilities of getting out logs in the spring from the islands in the Yukon. He would be in camp by 6 o'clock. A bit after dark, it was true, but the boys would be there. A fire would be going, and a hot supper would be ready. As for lunch, he pressed his hand against the protruding bundle under his jacket. It was also under his shirt, wrapped up in a handkerchief and lying against the naked skin. It was the only way to keep the biscuits from freezing. He smiled agreeably to himself as he thought of those biscuits, each cut open and sopped in bacon grease, and each enclosing a generous slice of fried bacon. He plunged in among the big spruce trees. The trail was faint. A foot of snow had fallen since the last sled had passed over, and he was glad he was without a sled, traveling light. In fact, he carried nothing but the lunch wrapped in the handkerchief. He was surprised, however, at the cold. It certainly was cold, he concluded, as he rubbed his numbed nose and cheekbones with his mittened hand. He was a warm-whiskered man, but the hair on his face did not protect the high cheekbones and the eager nose that thrust itself aggressively into the frosty air. At the man's heels trotted a dog, a big native husky, the proper wolf dog, gray-coated and without any visible or temperamental difference from its brother, the wild wolf. The animal was depressed by the tremendous cold. It knew that it was no time for traveling. Its instinct told it a truer tale than was told to the man by the man's judgment. In reality, it was not merely colder than 50 below zero. It was colder than 60 below, then 70 below. It was 75 below zero. Since the freezing point is 32 above zero, it meant that 107 degrees of frost obtained. The dog did not know anything about thermometers. Possibly in its brain there was no sharp consciousness of a condition of very cold, such as was in the man's brain. But the brute had its instinct. It experienced a vague but menacing apprehension that subdued it and made it slink along at the man's heels. It made it question eagerly every unwanted movement of the man, as if expecting him to go into camp or to seek shelter somewhere and build a fire. The dog had learned fire, and it wanted fire, or else to burrow under the snow and cuddle its warmth away from the air. The frozen moisture of its breath had settled on its fur in a fine powder of frost, and eventually were its jowls, muzzle, and eyelashes whitened by its crystalled breath. The man's red beard and mustache were likewise frosted, but more solidly, the deposit taking the form of ice and increasing with every warmth. Moist breath he exhaled. Also, the man was chewing tobacco, and the muzzle of ice held his lips so rigidly that he was unable to clear his chin when he expelled the juice. The result was that a crystal beard of the color and solidity of amber was increasing its length on his chin. If he fell down, it would shatter itself, like glass, into brittle fragments. But he did not mind the appendage. It was the penalty all tobacco chewers paid in that country, and he had been out before in 2 cold snaps. They had not been so cold as this, he knew, but by the spirit thermometer at 60 mile, he knew they had registered at 50 below and at 55. He held on through the level stretch of woods for several miles, crossed a wide flat of, not going to say that word, and dropped down a bank to the frozen bed of the small stream. This was Henderson Creek, and he knew he was 10 miles from the forks. He looked at his watch. It was 10 o'clock. He was making 4 miles an hour, and he calculated that he would arrive at the forks at 12:30. He decided to celebrate that event by eating his lunch there. Let's actually move this over here, craning my neck a bit. The dog dropped in again at his heels, with a tail drooping in discouragement, as the man swung along the creek bed. The furrow of the old sled was plainly visible, but a dozen inches of snow covered the marks of the last runners. In a month, no man had come up or down that silent creek. The man held steadily on. He was not much given to thinking, and just then particularly he had nothing to think about, save that he would eat lunch at the fork, and then at 6 o'clock he would be in camp with the boys. There was nobody to talk to, and had there been, speech would have been impossible because of the ice muzzle on his mouth, so he continued monotonously to chew tobacco and to increase the length of his amber beard. Once in a while the thought reiterated itself that it was very cold and that he had never experienced such cold. As he walked along, he rubbed his cheekbones and nose with the back of his mittened hand. He did this automatically, now and again changing hands, but rub as he would, the instant he stopped, his cheekbones went numb, and the following instant the end of his nose went numb. That was sure to frost his cheeks, he knew that, and experienced the pang of regret that he had not devised a nose strap of the sort Bud wore in cold snaps. Such a strap passed across the cheeks as well, and saved them. But it didn't matter much after all. What were frosted cheeks? A bit painful, that was all. They were never serious. Empty as the man's mind was of thoughts, he was keenly observant, and he noticed the changes in the creek, curves and bends and timber jams, and always he sharply noted where he placed his feet. Once, coming around a bend, he shied abruptly, like a startled horse, curving away from the place where he had been walking and retreated several paces back along the trail. The creek, he knew, was frozen clear to the bottom. No creek could contain water in that Arctic winter. But he knew also that there were springs that bubbled out from the hillsides and ran along under the snow and on top of the ice of the creek. He knew that the coldest snaps never froze these springs, and he knew likewise their danger. They were traps. They hid pools of water under the snow that might be 3 inches deep, or 3 feet. Sometimes a skin of ice, half an inch thick, covered them, and in turn was covered by the snow. Sometimes there were alternate layers of water and ice skin, so that when one broke through, he kept on breaking through for a while, sometimes wetting himself to the waist. And that was why he had shied in such panic. He had felt the give under his feet and heard the crackle of a snow-hidden ice skin. And to get his feet wet in such a temperature meant trouble and danger. At the very least it meant delay, for he would be forced to stop and build a fire, and under its protection to bare his feet while he dried his socks and moccasins. He stood and studied the creek bed and its banks, and decided that the flow of water came from the right. He reflected a while, rubbing his nose and cheeks, then skirted to the left, stepping gingerly and testing the footing for each step. Once clear of the danger, he took a fresh chew of tobacco and swung along at his 4-mile gait. In the course of the next 2 hours, he came upon several similar traps. Usually the snow above the hidden pools had a sunken, candied appearance that advertised the danger. Once again, however, he had a close call, and once, suspecting danger, he compelled the dog to go out in front. The dog did not want to go. It hung back until the man shoved it forward, then it went quickly across the white, unbroken surface. Suddenly it broke through, floundered to one side, and got away to firmer footing. It had wet its 4 feet and legs, and almost immediately the water that clung to it turned to ice. It made quick efforts to lick the ice off its legs, then dropped down in the snow and began to bite out the ice that had formed between the toes. This was a matter of instinct. To permit the ice to remain would mean sore feet. It did not know this. It merely obeyed the mysterious prompting that arose from the deep crypts of its being. But the man knew, having achieved a judgment on the subject, and he removed a mitten from his right hand and helped tear out the ice particles. He did not expose his fingers more than a minute, and was astonished at the swift numbness that smote them. It certainly was cold. He pulled on the mitten hastily and beat the hand savagely across his chest. At 12 o'clock, the day was at its brightest, yet the sun was too far south on its winter journey to clear the horizon. The bulge of the earth intervened between it and the Henderson Creek, where the man walked under a clear sky at noon and cast no shadow. At 12:30, to the minute, he arrived at the forks of the creek. He was pleased at the speed he had made. If he kept it up, he would certainly be with the boys by 6. He unbuttoned his jacket and shirt and drew forth his lunch. The action consumed no more than a quarter of a minute, yet in that brief moment the numbness lay hold of the exposed fingers. He did not put the mitten on, but instead struck the fingers a dozen sharp smashes against his leg. Then he sat down on a snow-covered log to eat. The sting that followed upon the striking of his fingers against his leg ceased so quickly that he was startled, but he had no chance to take a bite of biscuit. He struck the fingers repeatedly and returned them to the mitten, bearing the other hand for the purpose of eating. He tried to take a mouthful, but the ice muzzle prevented. He had forgotten to build a fire and thaw out. He chuckled at his foolishness, and as he chuckled, he noted the numbness creeping into the exposed fingers. Also, he noted that the stinging which had first come to his toes when he sat down was already passing away. He wondered whether the toes were warm or numbed. He moved them inside the moccasins and decided that they were numbed. He pulled the mitten on hurriedly and stood up. He was a bit frightened. He stamped up and down until the stinging returned into the feet. It certainly was cold, was his thought. That man from Sulphur Creek had spoken the truth when telling how cold it sometimes got in the country, and he had laughed at him at the time. That showed one must not be too sure of things. There was no mistake about it. It was cold. He strode up and down, stamping his feet and threshing his arms until reassured by the returning warmth. Then he got out matches and proceeded to make a fire. From the undergrowth, where high water of the previous spring had lodged a supply of seasoned twigs, he got his firewood. Working carefully from a small beginning, he soon had a roaring fire, over which he thawed the ice from his face, and in the protection of which he ate his biscuits. For the moment, the cold of space was outwitted. The dog took satisfaction in the fire, stretching out close enough for warmth and far enough away to escape being singed. When the man had finished, he filled his pipe and took his comfortable time over a smoke. Then he pulled on his mittens, settled the ear flaps of his cap firmly about his ears, and took the creek trail up the left fork. The dog was disappointed and yearned back towards the fire. This man did not know cold. Possibly all the generations of his ancestry had been ignorant of cold, of real cold, of cold 107 degrees below freezing point. But the dog knew, all its ancestry knew, and it had inherited the knowledge, and it knew that it was not good to walk abroad in such fearful cold. It was the time to lie snug in a hole in the snow and wait for a curtain of cloud to be drawn across the face of outer space whence this cold came. On the other hand, there was keen intimacy between the dog and the man. The one was the toil slave of the other, and the only caresses it had ever received were the caresses of the whiplash and of harsh and menacing throat sounds that threatened the whiplash. So the dog made no effort to communicate its apprehension to the man. It was not concerned in the welfare of the man. It was for its own sake that it yearned back toward the fire. But the man whistled and spoke to it with the sound of whiplashes, and the dog swung in at the man's heels and followed after. The man took a chew of tobacco and proceeded to start a new amber beard. Also, his moist breath quickly powdered with white his mustache, eyebrows, and lashes. There did not seem to be so many springs on the left fork of the Henderson, and for half an hour the man saw no signs of any. And then it happened. At a place where there were no signs, where the soft, unbroken snow seemed to advertise solidity underneath, the man broke through. It was not deep. He wetted himself halfway to the knees before he floundered out to the firm crust. He was angry and cursed his luck aloud. He had hoped to get into camp with the boys at 6 o'clock, and this would delay him an hour, for he would have to build a fire and try out his footgear. This was imperative at that low temperature. He knew that much, and he turned aside to the bank, which he climbed. On top, tangled in the underbrush, about the trunks of several small spruce trees, was a high-water deposit of dry firewood, sticks and twigs principally, but also larger portions of seasoned branches and fine, dry last year's grasses. He threw several large pieces on top of the snow. This served for a foundation and prevented the young flame from drowning itself in the snow it otherwise would melt. The flame he got by touching a match to a small shred of birch bark that he took from his pocket. This burned even more readily than paper. Placing it on the foundation, he fed the young flame with wisps of dry grass and with the tiniest dry twigs. He worked slowly and carefully, keenly aware of his danger. Gradually, as the flame grew stronger, he increased the size of the twigs with which he fed it. He squatted in the snow, pulling the twigs out from their entanglement in the brush and feeding directly to the flame. He knew there must be no failure. When it is 75 below zero, a man must not fail in his first attempt to build a fire. That is, if his feet are wet. If his feet are dry and he fails, he can run along the trail for half a mile and restore his circulation. But the circulation of wet and freezing feet cannot be restored by running when it is 75 below. No matter how fast he runs, the wet feet will freeze the harder. All this the man knew. The old-timer on Sulphur Creek had told him about it the previous fall, and now he was appreciating the advice. Already all sensation had gone out of his feet. To build the fire, he had been forced to remove his mittens, and the fingers had quickly gone numb. His pace of 4 miles an hour had kept his heart pumping to the surface, had kept pumping blood to the surface of his body and to all the extremities, but the instant he stopped, the action of the pump eased down. The cold of space smote the unprotected tip of the planet, and he, being on that unprotected tip, received the full force of the blow. The blood of his body recoiled before it. The blood was alive, like the dog, and like the dog, it wanted to hide away and cover itself up from the fearful cold. So long as he walked 4 miles an hour, he pumped that blood, willy-nilly, to the surface. But now it ebbed away and sank down into the recesses of his body. The extremities were the first to feel its absence. His wet feet froze the faster, and his exposed fingers numbed the faster, though they had not yet begun to freeze. Nose and cheeks were already freezing, while the skin of all his body chilled as it lost its blood. But he was safe. Toes and nose and cheeks would only be touched by the frost, for the fire was beginning to burn with strength. He was feeding it with twigs the size of his finger. In another minute, he would be able to feed it with branches the size of his wrist, and then he could remove his wet footgear, and while it dried, he could keep his naked feet warm by the fire, rubbing them at first, of course, with snow. The fire was a success. He was safe. He remembered the advice of the old-timer on Sulphur Creek and smiled. The old-timer had been very serious in laying down the law that no man must travel alone in the Klondike after 50 below. Well, here he was. He had had the accident. He was alone, and he had saved himself. Those old-timers were rather womanish. Man could travel alone. Some of them, he thought. All a man had to do was keep his head, and he was all right. Any man who was a man could travel alone. But it was surprising, the rapidity with which his cheeks and nose were freezing, and he had not thought his fingers could go lifeless in so short a time. Lifeless they were, for he could scarcely make them move together to grip a twig, and they seemed remote from his body and from him. When he touched a twig, he had to look and see whether or not he had hold of it. The wires were pretty well down between him and the finger ends. All of which counted for little. There was the fire, snapping and crackling and promising life with every dancing flame. He started to untie his moccasins. They were coated with ice. The thick German socks were like sheaths of iron halfway to his knees, and the moccasin strings were like rods of steel, all twisted and knotted as by some conflagration. For a moment he tugged with his numbed fingers. Then, realizing the folly of it, he drew his sheath knife. But before he could cut the strings, it happened. It was his own fault, or rather, his mistake. He should not have built the fire under the spruce tree. He should have built it in the open. But it had been easier to pull the twigs from the brush and drop them directly on the fire. Now the tree under which he had done this carried a weight of snow on its boughs. No wind had blown for weeks, and each bough was fully freighted. Each time he had pulled a twig, he had communicated a slight agitation to the tree, an imperceptible agitation, so far as he was concerned, but an agitation sufficient to bring about the disaster. High up in the tree, one bough capsized its load of snow. This fell on the boughs beneath, capsizing them. This process continued, spreading out and involving the whole tree. It grew like an avalanche, and it descended without warning upon the man in the fire, and the fire was blotted out. Where it had burned was a mantle of fresh and disordered snow. The man was shocked. It was as though he had just heard his own death sentence. For a moment, he sat and stared at the spot where the fire had been. Then he grew very calm. Perhaps the old-timer on Sulphur Creek was right. If he had only had a trail mate, he would have been in no danger now. The trail mate could have built the fire. Well, it was up to him to build the fire over again, and this second time there must be no failure. Even if he succeeded, he would most likely lose some toes. His feet must be badly frozen by now, and there would be some time before the second fire was ready. Such were his thoughts, but he did not sit and think them. He was busy all the time they were passing through his mind. He made a new foundation for a fire, this time in the open, where no treacherous tree could blot it out. Next, he gathered dry grasses and tiny twigs from the high water flotsam. He could not bring his fingers together to pull them out, but he was able to gather them by the handful. In this way, he got many rotten twigs and bits of green moss that were undesirable, but it was the best he could do. He worked methodically, even collecting an armful of the larger branches to be used later when the fire gathered strength. And all the while, the dog sat and watched him, a certain yearning wistfulness in its eyes, for it looked upon him as the fire provider, and the fire was slow in coming. When all was ready, the man reached in his pocket for a second piece of birch bark. He knew the bark was there, and though he could not feel it with his fingers, he could hear its crisp rustling as he fumbled for it. Try as he would, he could not clutch hold of it, and all the time, in his consciousness, was the knowledge that each instant his feet were freezing. This thought tended to put him in a panic, but he fought against it and kept calm. He pulled on his mittens with his teeth and threshed his arm back and forth, beating his hands with all his might against his sides. He did this sitting down, and he stood up to do it. And all the while the dog sat in the snow, its wolf brush of a tail curled around warmly over its forefeet, its sharp wolf ears pricked forward intently as it watched the man. And the man, as he beat and threshed with his arms and hands, felt a great surge of envy as he regarded the creature that was warm and secure in its natural covering. After a time, he was aware of the first faraway signals of sensation in his beaten fingers. The faint tingling grew stronger till it evolved into a stinging ache that was excruciating, but which the man hailed with satisfaction. He stripped the mitten from his right hand and fetched forth the birch bark. The exposed fingers were quickly going numb again. Next, he brought out his bunch of sulfur matches, but the tremendous cold had already driven the life out of his fingers. In his effort to separate one match from the others, the whole bunch fell in the snow. He tried to pick it out of the snow, but failed. The dead fingers could neither touch nor clutch. He was very careful. He drove the thought of his freezing feet, nose, and cheeks out of his mind, devoting his whole soul to the matches. He watched, using the sense of vision in place of that of touch, and when he saw his fingers on each side of the bunch, he closed them. That is, he willed to close them, for the wires were drawn, and the fingers did not obey. He pulled the mitten on the right hand and beat it fiercely against his knee. Then, with both mittened hands, he scooped up the bunch of matches, along with much snow, into his lap. Yet he was no better off. After some manipulation, he managed to get the bunch between the heels of his mittened hands. In this fashion, he carried it to his mouth. The ice crackled and snapped when, by a violent effort, he opened his mouth. He drew the lower jaw in, curled the upper lip out of the way, and scraped the bunch with his upper teeth in order to separate a match. He succeeded in getting one, which he dropped on his lap. He was no better off. He could not pick it up. Then he devised a way. He picked it up in his teeth and scratched it on his leg. 20 times he scratched before he succeeded in lighting it. As it flamed, he held it with his teeth to the birch bark, but the burning brimstone went up his nostrils and into his lungs, causing him to cough spasmodically. The match fell into the snow and went out. The old-timer on Sulphur Creek was right. He thought in the moment of controlled despair that ensued. After 50 below, a man should travel with a partner. Beat his hands, but failed in exciting any sensation. Suddenly he bared both hands, removing the mittens with his teeth. He got the whole bunch between the heels of his hands. His arm muscles not being frozen enabled him to press the hand heels tightly against the matches. Then he scratched the bunch along his leg. It flared into flame. 70 sulfur matches at once. There was no wind to blow them out. He kept his head to one side to escape the strangling fumes, and held the blazing bunch to the birch bark. As he so held it, and he became aware of sensation in his hand. His flesh was burning. He could smell it. Deep down the surface he could feel it. The sensation developed into pain that grew acute, and still he endured it, holding the flame of the matches clumsily to the bark that would not light readily, because his own burning hands were in the way, absorbing most of the flame. At last, when he could endure no more, he jerked his hands apart. The blazing matches fell sizzling into the snow, but the birch bark was alight. He began laying dry grasses and the tiniest of twigs on the flame. He could not pick and choose, for he had to lift the fuel between the heels of his hands. Small pieces of rotten wood and green moss clung to the twigs, and he bit them off as well as he could with his teeth. He cherished the flame carefully and awkwardly. It meant life, and it must not perish. The withdrawal of blood from the surface of his body now made him begin to shiver, and he grew more awkward. A large piece of green moss fell squarely on the little fire. He tried to poke it out with his fingers, but his shivering frame made him poke too far, and he disrupted the nucleus of the little fire, the burning grasses and tiny twigs separating and scattering. He tried to poke them together again, but in spite of the tenseness of the effort, his shivering got away with him. and the twigs were hopelessly scattered. Each twig gushed a puff of smoke and went out. The fire provider had failed. As he looked apathetically about him, his eyes chanced on the dog, sitting across the ruins of the fire from him, in the snow, making restless, hunching movements, slightly lifting one forefoot and then the other, shifting its weight back and forth on them with wistful eagerness. The sight of the dog put a wild idea into his head. He remembered the tale of the man, caught in a blizzard, who killed a steer and crawled inside the carcass and so was saved. He would kill the dog and bury his hands in the warm body until the numbness went out of them. Sorry, by the way, I didn't remember how dark this got. Then he could build another fire. He spoke to the dog, calling it to him, but in his voice was a strange note of fear that frightened the animal, who had never known the man to speak in such a way before. Something was the matter, and its suspicious nature sensed danger. It knew not what danger, but somewhere, somehow, in its brain arose an apprehension of the man. It flattened its ears down at the sound of the man's voice, and its restless hunching movements and the lifting and shifting of its forefeet became more pronounced. But it would not come to the man. He got on his hands and knees and crawled toward the dog. This unusual posture again excited suspicion, and the animal sidled mincingly away. The man sat up in the snow for a moment and struggled for calmness. Then he pulled on his mittens by means of his teeth and got upon his feet. He glanced down at first in order to assure himself that he was really standing up. The absence of sensation in his feet left him unrelated to the earth. His erect position in itself started to drive the webs of suspicion from the dog's mind, and when he spoke peremptorily, with the sound of whiplashes in his voice, the dog rendered its customary allegiance and came to him. As it came within reaching distance, the man lost control. His arms flashed out to the dog, and he experienced genuine surprise when he discovered that his hands could not clutch, that there was neither bend nor feeling in the fingers. He had forgotten for the moment that they were frozen, and that they were freezing more and more. All this happened quickly, and before the animal could get away, he encircled its body with his arms. He sat down in the snow, and in this fashion held the dog, while it snarled and whined and struggled. But it was all he could do, hold its body encircled in his arms and sit there. He realized that he could not kill the dog. There was no way to do it. With his helpless hands, he could neither draw nor hold his sheath knife nor throttle the animal. He released it, and it plunged wildly away, with tail between its legs and still snarling. It halted 40 feet away and surveyed him curiously, with ears sharply prickled forward. The man looked down at his hands in order to locate them, and found them hanging on the ends of his arms. It struck him as curious that one should have to use his eyes in order to find out where his hands were. He began threshing his arms back and forth, beating the mittens against his sides. He did this for 5 minutes, violently, and his heart pumped enough blood up to the surface to put a stop to his shivering. But no sensation was aroused in the hands. He had an impression that they hung like weights on the ends of his arms, but when he tried to run the impression down, could not find it. A certain fear of death, dull and oppressive, came to him. This fear quickly became poignant, as he realized that it was no longer a mere matter of freezing his fingers and toes, or of losing his hands and feet, but that it was a matter of life and death, with the chances against him. This threw him into a panic, and he turned and ran up the creek bed along the old dim trail. The dog joined in behind and kept up with him. He ran blindly, without intention, in fear such as he had never known in his life. Slowly, as he plowed and floundered through the snow, he began to see things again: the banks of the creek, the old timber jams, the leafless aspens, and the sky. The running made him feel better. He did not shiver. Maybe if he ran on, his feet would thaw out. And anyway, if he ran far enough, he would reach camp and the boys. Without doubt, he would lose some fingers and toes and some of his face, but the boys would take care of him and save the rest of him when he got there. And at the same time, there was another thought in his mind that said he would never get to the camp and the boys, that it was too many miles away, that the freezing had too great a start on him, that he would soon be stiff and dead. This thought he kept in the background and refused to consider. Sometimes it pushed itself forward and demanded to be heard, but he thrust it back and strove to think of other things. It struck him as curious that he could run at all on feet so frozen that he could not feel them when they struck the earth and took the weight of his body. He seemed to himself to skim along above the surface and to have no connection with the earth. Somewhere, he had once seen a winged Mercury. He wondered if Mercury felt as he felt when skimming over the earth. His theory of running until he reached camp and the boys had one flaw in it. He lacked the endurance. Several times he stumbled, and finally he tottered, crumpled up, and fell. When he tried to rise, he failed. He must sit and rest, he decided. And next time he would merely walk and keep on going. As he sat and regained his breath, he noted that he was feeling quite warm and comfortable. He was not shivering, and it even seemed that a warm glow had come to his chest and trunk. And yet, when he touched his nose or cheeks, there was no sensation. Running would not thaw them out, nor would it thaw out his hands and feet. Then the thought came to him that the frozen portions of his body must be extending. He tried to keep this thought down, to forget it, to think of something else. He was aware of the panicky feeling that it caused, and he was afraid of the panic. But the thought asserted itself, and persisted, until it produced a vision of his body totally frozen. This was too much, and he made another wild run along the trail. Once he slowed down to a walk, but the thought of the freezing extended itself and made him run again. All the time, the dog ran with him, at his heels. When he fell down a second time, it curled its tail over its forefeet and sat in front of him, facing him curiously, eager and intent. The warmth and security of the animal angered him, and he cursed it till it flattened down its ears appeasingly. This time, the shivering came more quickly upon the man. He was losing in his battle with the frost. It was creeping into his body from all sides. The thought of it drove him on, but he ran no more than 100 feet when he staggered and pitched headlong. It was his last panic. When he had recovered his breath and control, he sat up and entertained in his mind the conception of meeting death with dignity. However, the conception did not come to him in such terms. His idea of it was that he had been making a fool of himself, running around like a chicken with its head cut off. Such was the simile that occurred to him. Well, he was bound to freeze anyway, and he might as well take it decently. With this newfound peace of mind came the first glimmerings of drowsiness. A good idea, he thought, to sleep off to death. It was like taking an anesthetic. Freezing was not so bad as people thought. There were lots of worse ways to die. He pictured the boys finding his body next day. Suddenly, he found himself with them, coming along the trail and looking for himself. And still with them, he came around a turn in the trail and found himself lying in the snow. He did not belong with himself anymore, for even then he was out of himself, standing with the boys and looking at himself in the snow. It certainly was cold, was his thought. When he got back to the States, he could tell the folks what real cold was. He drifted on from this to a vision of the old-timer on Sulphur Creek. He could see him quite clearly, warm and comfortable, and smoking a pipe. "You were right, old hoss. You were right," the man mumbled to the old-timer of Sulphur Creek. Then the man drowsed off into what seemed to him the most comfortable and satisfying sleep he had ever known. The dog sat facing him and waiting. The brief day drew to a close in a long, slow twilight. There were no signs of a fire to be made. And besides, never in the dog's experience had it known a man to sit like that in the snow and make no fire. As the twilight grew on, its eager yearning for the fire mastered it, and, with a great lifting and shifting of its forefeet, it whined softly, then flattened its ears down in anticipation of being chidden by the man. But the man remained silent. Later, the dog whined loudly, and still later, it crept close to the man and caught the scent of death. This made the animal bristle and back away. A little longer, it delayed, howling under the stars that leaped and danced and shone brightly in the cold sky. Then it turned and trotted up the trail in the direction of the camp it knew, where, were the other food providers and fire providers. And that is the short story To Build a Fire by Jack London. You know, I will say, I did not realize how long that one was, but I also... That might have been a bit of a downer to read at the end of a first ASMR stream. Yeah, I know, right, CS Neutron? Yeah, that might not have exactly been the best choice. When I think of short stories, though, that's one of my favorite. I absolutely love it. Like, because it's tense, it's exciting. You're like, oh shit, is he gonna die? And he does die, but it's like, okay. Like, I don't know. If I were to have a story where the main character dies at the end, and it's not like, you know, dying like naturally or whatever, right? Like, I don't know. As far as ways to go, like drowning, burning alive, and freezing. Freezing's pretty good. Yes, really immersive. Yeah. Good prose works wonders. It does. It does. All right. Well, that is going to be it for today. Thanks for hanging out. And yeah. I might do this again, might not sure. And if so, you know, we'll keep figuring out what things work well and what doesn't. But yeah. Great to hang out with you guys, and I will catch you next time. Stay safe out there. And you know, if you're going out somewhere crazy cold, bring a friend and lots of matches. All right. Good night.